She begged him not to cross the line. Those words still echoed in his memory long after everything had fallen apart. Daniel was not an ordinary man. He was a preacher, the kind of man people in his small town respected deeply. His sermons brought comfort to the broken, strength to the weak, and guidance to the lost. Every Sunday, the church overflowed with families who clung to his words like a lifeline. He had always believed his faith was unshakable, a rock that nothing could move. But faith is tested not in the calm, but in the storm. Daniel's life had already been difficult. His wife, Rebecca, had passed away after a long illness, leaving him with their only daughter, Grace. Losing Rebecca had cut him deeper than words could explain. Every night he prayed for strength, for the ability to stay true to the calling he had given his life to. But loneliness was a dangerous companion. When Sarah arrived in town, everything began to change. She was a young woman in her late 20s, fragile in appearance but with a strength in her eyes that caught Daniel's attention. She came to the church often, sitting quietly in the back pew, never speaking much, but always staying after the service, staring at the altar, as if searching for answers. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the stained glass windows with colors of fire, Daniel found Sarah sitting there, tears streaming down her face. He approached her gently, offering a kind word, a prayer, and his listening ear. She told him of her life, a troubled past, a broken family, and a desperate desire to start fresh. Daniel felt compassion stirring within him. She was lost, and he believed God had brought her to him for guidance. In the weeks that followed, Sarah sought Daniel's counsel often. They would sit in his office, sometimes for hours, talking about life, pain, forgiveness, and healing. But slowly, the lines began to blur. Daniel tried to remind himself that he was a spiritual leader, not a man who could allow emotions to cloud his mission. Yet, every time he looked at Sarah, he felt something awaken inside him, something he had buried since Rebecca's death. Sarah noticed it too. One evening, as rain poured outside and thunder shook the earth, Daniel sat across from her, the flickering lamp casting long shadows in the room. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, and she whispered, "Please, don't cross the line." Daniel froze. She had spoken aloud the very battle raging inside him. "I trust you," she continued, her voice trembling. "You're different from other men. Don't destroy that. Don't let me lose the one good thing I've found." Daniel nodded, his heart heavy. But even in that moment, temptation pressed harder. He wrestled with himself every day afterward. His prayers became desperate cries, not for others, but for his own soul. Weeks turned into months, and whispers began spreading in town. People noticed how often Sarah was with him, how closely she looked at him. The congregation began to murmur, and the elders grew uneasy. Daniel reassured them nothing had happened because it hadn't. Not yet, but in his heart he knew he was teetering on the edge of a cliff. Then came the night that shattered everything. Sarah had come to him in despair. She had argued with her estranged father, and the wounds of her past had reopened. She was shaking, sobbing, pleading for comfort. Daniel held her hands, praying aloud for her. But as the prayer ended, silence filled the room and something shifted. He looked into her eyes, and for a moment he forgot who he was, what he represented, and the vow he had made to God. He crossed the line. The guilt hit him immediately, heavier than any weight he had ever carried. Sarah pulled away, tears burning down her face. "I told you not to," she whispered. Her words cut deeper than any blade. "I begged you not to." The next morning, everything unraveled. Sarah disappeared from town, leaving only a note that said she could never forgive him for breaking the trust she had placed in him. Rumors spread like wildfire, tearing through the church community. Some defended him, refusing to believe, but others demanded answers. Daniel stood in the pulpit the following Sunday, but the words caught in his throat. The faces staring back at him no longer looked at him with faith, but with suspicion and pain. He stepped down. In the weeks that followed, Daniel lost everything: his congregation, his reputation, and the very identity he had lived for. Alone in his house, he stared at the cross hanging on the wall, feeling as though God himself had turned his face away. He had broken not only Sarah's trust but his own faith. But brokenness has a strange way of leading to truth. One evening, Daniel walked outside into the cold night air. The stars above seemed distant, yet somehow steady. For the first time he admitted aloud what he had been running from. He was weak, human, and flawed. His faith had been built on the illusion of his own strength, but real faith was never about being perfect. It was about falling and finding the courage to rise again. Months later, Daniel did not return to the pulpit. Instead, he began to quietly serve in ways that no one saw. He volunteered at shelters, helped the poor, and spoke privately with people who were broken like him. No grand sermons, no spotlight, just small acts of service. Through those moments, he began to feel something stirring again, not the pride of being a preacher, but the humility of being a man forgiven. The memory of Sarah never left him. He prayed for her often, not for her to return, but for her healing, and though he could never undo what had been done, he carried the lesson she left him with. Sometimes the people we're meant to protect are the very ones we must be most careful not to harm. Daniel's faith had been shattered, but in the pieces, he discovered something truer than he had ever known. Faith was not about never failing. It was about learning, repenting, and rising from the ruins with a heart that beats more gently, more humbly, and more honestly. He would never forget the words, "Please, don't cross the line." They became the reminder of a moment that broke him, but also the beginning of his truest faith.